The galaxy was burning. Ambassador Talis stood in the great hall of the Velar High Council. Her body was made of living crystal, and she glowed with soft blue light. Around her, 11 other species had sent their leaders. They were all afraid. Talis could see it in the way they moved, the way they spoke in whispers. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a map of their space. Red spots covered it like a disease. Each red spot was a world that had fallen to the Harkin swarm. 14 colonies lost in the last 30 days, said Councillor Bryn. He was a tall being with 6 arms and skin like gray silk. The swarm adapts to every weapon we use. Our fleet is almost gone. Talis watched the red spots grow. She had lived for 200 years. She had seen wars before, but nothing like this. The Harkin were not like any enemy they had faced. They did not want land or resources. They simply consumed. They ate ships, stations, planets. They ate everything alive and turned it into more of themselves. We have one option left, Talis said. Her voice rang like a bell in the quiet hall. The other leaders turned to look at her. Some of them already knew what she was going to say. She could see the fear grow stronger in their eyes. No, said Councillor Mava, a small creature covered in soft fur. We cannot. The quarantine exists for a reason. The quarantine will mean nothing if we are all dead, Talis replied. She walked to the display and touched it. The map changed. It zoomed out, showing more of the galaxy. In one corner, marked with warning symbols, was a single yellow star. Sol, the home system of the humans. 300 years ago, our ancestors discovered them, Talis said. They studied them from far away. They watched their history, their wars, the way they treated each other and their world. Our ancestors were so frightened by what they saw that they agreed to never make contact. They were right to be frightened, said Councillor Bryn. The humans come from a death world. Their planet has extreme gravity. Their air is made of oxygen, which burns. They have diseases that would kill any of us in hours. And yet, they survive. They thrive. They conquered their entire world through violence. Talis nodded. Yes, all of this is true. They are dangerous. Perhaps the most dangerous species this galaxy has ever produced. She turned to face the council. And that is exactly why we need them. The argument lasted for 6 hours. Some leaders screamed that Talis was mad. Others wept and said they would rather die than ask the humans for help. But in the end, with more red spots appearing on the map every hour, the vote passed. Talis walked alone to the ancient communication chamber. It was deep below the council hall, in a room that had not been opened in 3 centuries. The beacon inside was old technology, built by a species that no longer existed. It could send a message across the entire galaxy in seconds. She activated it and spoke a simple message. This is Ambassador Talis of the Velar Collective. We are dying. We need help. Please. Then she waited far across the galaxy, on a station orbiting Earth. Admiral Park Delhume was drinking tea when the message arrived. He was 63 years old. His hair was gray, and his face was covered in scars from battles most people had forgotten. He had fought in the Europa campaign, when Earth's colonies in the outer solar system had rebelled. He had led the defense during the Mars uprising. He had buried more friends than he could count. Now he commanded the orbital station Horizon. And he spent most of his days doing paperwork and watching young officers train for wars that might never come. When the communication officer called him to the bridge, he expected nothing important. Another asteroid that needed redirecting. Another cargo ship with engine trouble. Instead, he found his entire bridge crew standing in silence, staring at a screen. "Sir," said Captain Kim Yuna. She was his second in command. A sharp woman in her 40s with short black hair and cold eyes. You need to see this. Do-hyun read the message. Then he read it again. Is this real? He asked. We verified the signal origin, Yuna said. It came from beyond the quarantine zone. From Velar space. Do-hyun sat down slowly in his command chair. For 300 years, humanity had known they were not alone in the universe. They had detected alien signals, mapped alien territories. But the aliens had made it clear they wanted nothing to do with Earth. They locked us out, Yuna said. Her voice was hard. They treated us like animals. Like monsters. For 3 centuries, they pretended we did not exist. And now they want our help? Do-hyun understood her anger. Every human did. Growing up, they all learned the same lesson. The galaxy was full of life, and that life was afraid of them. But Do-hyun had fought in wars. He had seen what fear could do to people. He had also seen what it looked like when fear finally broke and turned to desperate hope. Call an emergency meeting of the Defense Council, he said. Every admiral, every general, every fleet commander. I want them online in 1 hour. Sir, Yuna said, you cannot be serious. After everything they did to us? Do-hyun stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, Earth hung in space, blue and green and beautiful. His home. The world that the galaxy called a death trap. They asked for help, Yuna, he said quietly. That is all that matters. He turned back to his crew. Prepare the fleet. The news spread across Earth like fire. For 300 years, humanity had built ships that would never leave their own solar system. They had trained soldiers for wars that would never happen. They had prepared for a day that most people believed would never come. Now that day was here in the shipyards orbiting Mars. Workers who had spent their whole lives building warships finally understood why. Admiral Park Do-hyun had given the order, and the fleet was waking up. Commander Lee Jin-ho stood on the bridge of the assault carrier Thunderhead. He was 38 years old, tall and thin, with a calm face that never showed what he was feeling inside. He had joined the Navy because his father had served, and his grandfather before that. 3 generations of his family had prepared for this moment. Around him, his crew moved with quiet purpose. They were young, most of them. They had trained in simulations all their lives. Now they were going to face the real thing. All systems ready, reported his weapons officer, a young man named Kan Se-woo. We have full ammunition on all decks. Plasma weapons, ballistic weapons, and the experimental stuff. Jin-ho nodded. And the ground forces? 5,000 Marines loaded and ready. Sergeant Han Mira sends her compliments. Jin-ho allowed himself a small smile. He had served with Mira before. She was tough as steel and twice as sharp. If anyone could lead ground troops against an unknown enemy, it was her. On the medical deck below, Officer Cho Yoonji was preparing for something she had only read about in books. Yoonji was 35, with gentle eyes and steady hands. She had become a doctor because she wanted to help people. Now she was studying files that made her hands shake. The Velar had sent data about themselves and the other species in their collective. Yoonji read about beings made of crystal, beings with silicon blood, beings that breathed methane and lived in temperatures that would freeze a human solid. She read about their medicines, their diseases, their weaknesses. So fragile, she thought. They are all so fragile. Then she read about the Harkin swarm, and she stopped thinking about fragility. She started thinking about survival. The Harkin were not truly alive, not in any way that made sense. They were part machine, part biology. They did not eat for food. They ate to grow. They consumed metal and flesh and turned everything into copies of themselves. They had no leaders, no commanders. They were one mind spread across billions of bodies. And they were coming. The fleet gathered above. Earth, 47 warships, 15 medical vessels, 3 carrier ships loaded with soldiers and supplies. It was the largest force humanity had ever assembled. Admiral Do-yoon stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching the fleet form up. Captain Kim Yuna stood beside him. "We received a response from the Veeler," Yuna said. "They cannot believe we are actually coming. Their message said, and I quote, 'We expected negotiations. We expected demands. We did not expect action.'" Do-hyun grunted. "They do not know humans very well. They do not know us at all, sir. Then they will learn." The fleet entered hyperspace. For 3 days, they traveled through the strange nothing between stars. In that time, Do-hyun called his commanders together and told them everything they knew about the enemy. "The Harken swarm adapts," he said. The holographic display showed images captured by Veeler sensors. Creatures that looked like insects, like snakes, like nightmares given form. Whatever weapon you use against them, they will learn to resist it. Usually within hours, sometimes within minutes. Lieutenant Beek Selman raised her hand. She was the youngest officer in the room, only 26 years old. She had graduated at the top of her class and earned her position through pure skill. "Sir, if they adapt to our weapons, what advantage do we have?" Do-hyun looked at her. Then he looked at all of them, these young men and women who had never seen real combat. "Humans do not just change our weapons," he said slowly. "We change how we fight. We change our tactics, our strategies, our entire way of thinking. We do it fast, and we do it well. That is our advantage." He paused. "The Harken adapt to survive. We adapt to win. There is a difference." On the carrier Thunderhead, Sergeant Han Mira gathered her Marines. Myra was 41 years old. Her face had a scar that ran from her left eye to her chin, earned in a training accident that would have killed most people. She had survived because she was too stubborn to die. That was what she told her troops, anyway. "Listen up," she said. "We are going into a fight that no human has ever faced. We are going to see things that will make no sense to us. We are going to face enemies that our grandfathers could not have imagined." She walked among them, looking at their faces. Some were scared. Some were excited. All of them were ready. "But we are human," Myra continued. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that burned entire continents. They did not give up. They did not surrender. And neither will we." She stopped and faced them all. "The galaxy thinks we are monsters. The galaxy thinks we are dangerous. Let us show them exactly how right they are." The Marines cheered. 3 days later, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Velar Prime, and they saw what war really looked like. The first thing Commander Lee Jin-ho saw was fire. Orbital stations burned in the darkness of space. Huge structures that must have taken decades to build were now twisted metal and floating bodies. Below them, the planet Velar Prime was covered in clouds of smoke and ash dot, and moving through all of it, like a living storm, was the Harken swarm. Jin-ho had seen images. He had studied the reports, but nothing could prepare him for this. The swarm was everywhere. Billions of creatures, some as small as insects, some larger than warships. They moved together like one giant animal, and they were heading straight for the refugee ships. "All hands battle stations," Jin-ho said into his communicator. His voice was calm. His heart was not. On the command ship, Admiral Do-hyun watched his fleet spread out into defensive positions. The carrier Thunderhead moved to protect the largest group of refugee ships. Other warships formed a line between the swarm and the planet. A communication came through. On the screen appeared a being made of crystal, glowing with faint blue light. She looked tired and scared. "I am Ambassador Tallis," she said. You actually came. We received your signal. Do-hyun replied simply. Where do you need us? Talis stared at him. In 300 years of galactic history, no species had ever responded to a distress call so quickly. No species had ever asked so few questions. The northern orbital sector, she said finally. 30,000 refugees are trapped there. Our ships cannot reach them. We will handle it, Do-hyun said. He cut the communication and turned to Captain Kim Yuna. Send the 3rd Battalion to the northern sector. Tell them to clear a path. On the Thunderhead, Sergeant Han Mira loaded her rifle and gathered her squad. We are going in hot, she told them. The Veeler station has been overrun. Our job is to get the survivors out. Kill anything that is not friendly. Private Yoon Tai-woo checked his weapons one last time. He was 23 years old, the youngest in the squad. He had joined the Marines because he wanted to see the stars. Now he was about to see them up close. The dropships launched. Mira watched through the viewport as they approached the damaged station. Holes had been torn in its hull. Emergency lights flickered inside. And moving in the shadows, she could see them. The Harkin. Landing in 30 seconds. The pilot announced. Myra stood and faced her Marines. Remember your training. Stay together. Watch each other's backs. And do not stop moving. They hit the deck running. The first Harkin they encountered was about the size of a dog. It had too many legs and teeth that looked like they were made of metal. It jumped at Tai-woo's face. He shot it out of the air. The plasma bolt burned a hole clean through it. Contact. Someone shouted. Then they were everywhere. Mira fired and moved. Fired and moved. The Harkin came at them from all directions. From the floor, from the ceiling, from inside the walls. Her Marines formed a circle and pushed forward, leaving dead creatures behind them. Plasma weapons are working, Kang Se-woo shouted. They will not work for long, Myra replied. Keep moving. She was right. Within 20 minutes, the Harkins started adapting. The plasma bolts that had killed them easily before now only slowed them down. Their bodies had grown some kind of shield. Switch to ballistic, Mira ordered. The Marines switched to their backup weapons. Old-fashioned bullets, the kind humans had used for centuries. The Harkin did not expect this. They fell again, but the swarm was learning. In the station's main hall, Myra's squad found the survivors. 200 Veeler citizens huddled together in fear. They looked at the humans with huge eyes, not sure if they should be relieved or terrified. We are here to help, Mira said. Follow us. They began the long fight back to the dropships. Halfway there, a corridor collapsed. Half the squad made it through. The other half, including Private Tai-woo, was trapped on the other side with 40 refugees and a swarm of Harkin closing in. Go! Tai-woo shouted into his communicator. Get the others out. I will hold them. Tai-woo, no. Mira called back, but he was already moving. He found a narrow doorway, the only entrance to the section where the refugees were hiding. He stood in that doorway with his rifle and waited. The Harkin came. Tai-woo shot the first wave. When his rifle ran out of ammunition, he used his pistol. When the pistol was empty, he grabbed a metal pipe from the damaged wall. For 4 hours, he held that doorway. The Harkin adapted to bullets. So he changed his tactics. He used the environment. He collapsed sections of ceiling on them. He led them into electrical traps. He fought with his hands and his teeth, and his will to survive. When the rescue team finally cut through the collapsed corridor, they found Tai-woo still standing. His armor was destroyed. 17 of his bones were broken. He was bleeding from wounds too many to count. Behind him, all 40 refugees were alive. Around him lay 212 dead Harkin. On the Veeler High Council ship, Ambassador Talis watched the helmet camera footage from the human Marines. She could not speak. She could not move. She simply watched as these creatures from the Deathworld refused to die. What are they? Counselor Bryn whispered beside her. Talis shook her head slowly. I do not know, she admitted, but I am very glad they are on our side. The first battle was over. The humans had won, but the war was just beginning. 6 weeks. That was how long the war lasted. To the Velar, it felt like 6 years. They had been fighting the Harken for 18 months before the humans arrived. They had lost billions of people. They had lost hope. Then the humans came, and everything changed. Commander Li Jinho developed what he called cascade tactics. The idea was simple. Never use the same weapon twice in a row. Every attack was different. Every battle used new strategies. On Monday, his pilots attacked with plasma weapons. On Tuesday, they used missiles. On Wednesday, they used focused light beams. On Thursday, they rammed their ships directly into Harken formations and ejected at the last second. The Harken could adapt to anything, but they could not adapt to everything at once. By the time they developed resistance to one weapon, the humans had already moved on to the next. You are insane, Captain Kim Yuna told Jinho during a strategy meeting. Your pilots are flying suicide missions every day, and they keep coming back, Jinho replied with a small smile. Humans are hard to kill. On the medical ships, Officer Cho Yoonji made a discovery that would change the war. She had been studying Harken biology for weeks. The creatures were strange, part machine and part living tissue. They were connected to each other through some kind of signal, like a radio wave that linked all their minds together, and human immune systems could disrupt that signal. Our antibodies, Yoonji explained to Admiral Do Yoon, react to the Harken tissue in a very specific way. If we modify them slightly, we can create a biological weapon. Anyone injected with it becomes poison to the Harken. One touch, and their connection to the hive mind breaks. Dohan frowned. It sounds dangerous. For the person who carries it. It is, Yoonji admitted. We do not know the long-term effects. It could be painful. It could cause permanent damage. Then, we cannot ask anyone to volunteer. Yoonji pulled up her sleeve. There was a small bandage on her arm. You do not have to ask, she said. I already did it to myself. Volunteers lined up the next day. Hundreds of humans agreed to become living weapons. They walked into Harken territory and let the creatures touch them. Wherever they went, the swarm weakened. On the surface of the third moon of Velar Prime, Admiral Park Do-hyun led a ground assault. He was 63 years old. He should have been on a ship, giving orders from safety. But the target was too important, and he would not ask his soldiers to take risks he would not take himself. The target was a hive node, one of the central points that controlled Harken activity in the region. Destroy it, and thousands of Harken would lose their connection to the swarm. The gravity on the moon was 1.4 times Earth normal. Every step felt like walking through mud. Do-hyun's respirator was damaged in the first hour, making every breath a struggle. But he kept going. His soldiers followed him. They fought through waves of Harken. They lost good people, but they did not stop. When Doan's rifle jammed, he did not retreat. He picked up a fallen Harken limb, a piece of hard shell and metal, and used it as a club. He beat his way through the last defenders and placed the explosive charges himself. The hive node exploded. The Harken in that region went silent. In space, Captain Kim Yuna coordinated the largest naval battle in human history. For 5 days, she barely slept. 4 hours total, stolen in short naps between crisis after crisis. The Harken threw everything they had at the human fleet. Creatures the size of mountains. Swarms so thick they blocked out the stars. Yuna fought them all. When her bridge took a direct hit, she did not panic. She grabbed a communicator, crawled into an escape pod, and kept giving orders while blood ran down her face. Redirect the fourth wing to Sector 7, she said calmly. Tell the Thunderhead to cover our retreat. And someone find me a medical kit. The Veeler watched all of this. They recorded everything. And they could not believe what they were seeing. Ambassador Tallis spent most of the war on the human command ship. She watched them fight. She watched them bleed. She watched them lose friends and comrades and keep fighting anyway. You do not make sense, she told Admiral Do-Yoon one night, when he had finally taken a few hours to rest. Your species should be dead 100 times over. Your planet should have killed you. Your history should have destroyed you. How are you still here? Do-Hyun thought about the question for a long time. Because we refuse to give up, he said finally. That is all it is. We are not stronger than other species. We are not smarter. We just refuse to accept that we cannot win. Even when everything says we should lose, we keep fighting. Because that is who we are. Tallis looked at him with her crystal eyes. We thought we quarantined you to protect ourselves, she said softly. We were afraid of what you might do to us. But now I wonder if we were wrong. Maybe we should have been preparing you to save us. The war entered its final phase. The Harken were weakening, but they were not defeated. Somewhere in the asteroid belt, their queen was hiding. The source of their hive mind. The heart of the swarm got to end the war. Someone would have to find her and kill her, and everyone knew it would probably be a one-way mission. The Hive Queen was hiding in the deepest part of the asteroid belt. She was enormous. A creature the size of a small moon, wrapped around an ancient asteroid. Her body pulsed with dark light, and from her mind flowed the signals that controlled every Harken in the system. Kill her, and the war would end. The problem was getting close enough. The Queen was protected by the largest concentration of Harken anyone had ever seen. Millions of creatures packed so tightly together that they formed a living shield. No ship could get through. No weapon could reach her. Except one. Medical Officer Cho Yoonji had developed a final weapon. A virus designed to attack the Queen's mind directly. It would not just kill her. It would destroy the hive mind signal completely. Every Harken connected to her would die instantly. But the virus had to be delivered directly into the Queen's body. Someone had to fly a ship into her, past all her defenses, and release the virus from inside. Admiral Do-Yoon called for volunteers. He expected to have to convince someone to take the mission. Instead, 47 people raised their hands. Lieutenant Beek Selman was the first. She was 26 years old, the youngest officer in the fleet. The one with the most life still ahead of her. And she wanted to fly the mission more than anyone. Why? Do-Hyun asked her, alone in his office. You have your whole future. Why throw it away? Somin looked at him with steady eyes. Because I am the best pilot we have. Because I have the highest chance of success. And because this is what being human means. We do the impossible things. We take the risks that no one else will take. That is why you answered the distress signal, is it not? Do-Hyun could not argue with her. The mission launched at dawn. Somin flew a modified shuttle, small and fast, loaded with Yoonji's virus. Commander Lee Jinho and the Thunderhead created a distraction, attacking the Queen's defenses from one side while Somin approached from another. The fighting was brutal. Ships exploded around her. Friends died to buy her seconds. But Somin kept flying. I am at the outer barrier, she reported. Her voice was calm. Beginning approach. The Queen's defenses closed around her. Harken creatures slammed into her shuttle. The hull cracked. Alarm screamed. Hull breach on deck 2. Hull breach on deck 3. Life support failing. Somin ignored the warnings. She flew straight at the Queen's body, looking for an opening. Somin, Admiral Do-Hyun's voice came through the communicator. You do not have to do this. We can find another way. Sir, she replied, I am human. This is exactly what I have to do. She found an opening, a gap in the Queen's shell, barely wide enough for her shuttle. She dove into it. Inside the Queen was like flying through a nightmare. Organic tunnels, pulsing with sick light. Creatures that had never seen sunlight growing in the darkness. Soman flew through them all, her shuttle falling apart around her. Approaching the core, she reported, releasing virus in 30 seconds. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. In the center, surrounded by twisted flesh and metal, was the Queen's brain, a massive organ that held the mind of 1 billion. Hearken. Soman released the virus. Then she ejected. Her shuttle exploded behind her. The virus spread through the Queen's body like fire. Soman floated in space, her suit damaged, watching as the creature that had killed billions began to die. The Queen screamed, not with sound, but with her mind. Every Harkin in the system felt it. And then, one by one, they went silent. The swarm collapsed. Creatures that had been fighting seconds ago simply stopped. They fell from the sky. They drifted in space. The war was over. Soman floated in the darkness, her oxygen running out. This is Lieutenant Beak Soman, she said into her communicator. Mission complete. I could use a ride home. Sergeant Han Mira's rescue team reached her with 40 seconds of oxygen remaining. 6 months later, the Velar Collective held a ceremony. Delegates from 12 species gathered in the Great Hall where the war had begun. But this time, there was no fear in the room. There was hope. Admiral Park Do-hyun stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by his officers. Kim Yuna, her face still scarred from the battle. Lee Jin-ho calm as always. Cho Yoonji, who had turned her own body into a weapon. Han Myra, tough and proud. Beak Soman, alive against all odds. Yoon Tai-woo, walking with a cane but walking nonetheless. They represented humanity, the species the galaxy had feared for 300 years. Ambassador Talis approached Do-hyun. She moved slowly, carefully, her crystal body glowing with warm light. We called you Deathworlders, she said. We meant it as a warning. We were afraid of what you might become. Do-hyun nodded. And now? Talis reached out and placed her hand over his. Human skin against living crystal. Warmth against cool light. Now we understand, she said. You are not creatures of death. You are creatures who face death and refuse to let it win. Not for yourselves. She gestured to the gathered alien species, all watching with new eyes. And not for strangers who called for help. Do-hyun smiled. The expression looked strange on his scarred face, but it was genuine. We are all neighbors now, he said. Talis signed the document that officially invited humanity into the galactic community. Not as quarantine dangers. Not as monsters. As allies. As friends. Later, Soman stood by a viewport, looking at the stars. Myra joined her. What happens now? Soman asked. Myra shrugged. We go home. We heal. We get ready for the next crisis. You think there will be another one? There is always another one. Myra looked at the young lieutenant. But now the galaxy knows something it did not know before. When they call for help, we answer. That is who we are. Soman nodded slowly. Outside the viewport, ships from 12 different species flew together for the first time. Human destroyers next to Velar transports. Marines from Earth helping refugees from worlds they had never heard of. The galaxy had changed. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they answered when called. The end.